Hello, I'm here to start off this series of creative writing classes. They're going to be shortish, like 20 minutes I think, and they are going to really, the idea is to kickstart your novel writing. A lot of us feel that we have a novel in us, and I think a lot of us actually do have a novel in us, and some of the things that stop us actually getting to the stage of having a novel published are things that we can actually really do something about. There are skills, there are really concrete skills that you can learn. There are tips that I can give you. There are strategies that you can employ to get yourself writing. You do need talent. The question of talent is it's a really, it's a kind of vague and weird one. And to be honest, I would put thoughts of that aside. I think the fact that you're here and you want to learn, you want to write this novel is enough. Do not question whether you have talent, I think is the first starting point. I think one thing I've got to say, people want to know how do you do it? There's a structure. And when you Google how to write a novel, which I just did, I've written 4, but I thought maybe, other people knew more than I do. But when you Google it, you get this list of things like, make a plan, figure out what your setting is, figure out who your characters are, do a chapter by chapter synopsis. And I disagree with all of that. And I'll tell you later why. I think I'm going to talk about planning and structure a bit later on in the process. So I'm going to do these weekly. But for now, what I want to do is really start talking to you about making space in your life for this. There's this great quote from Kingsley Amis, which says, "The art of writing is the art of applying the seat of one's trousers to the seat of one's chair." And I really agree with that. I think that the thing that shifted me into writing my first novel was I made this very concrete decision that I was going to take the first hour or 2 of every single day, regardless of what I had to do that day. I was going to carve out that time. I worked out that the morning was my creative time and decided to make that my writing time. I set it in stone, 5 days a week. I had 3 young children at the time, so it was only going to really be in school time. I was also working as a journalist and writing a non-fiction book, so I was having to juggle a lot of things, but I made time for it. I just did it every single day, and that, I think, shifted me from someone who was dabbling in writing and writing things and writing stories and writing this, that and the other, to somebody who was actually working on a novel. So that's something that I would really advise you to do from the off, is find a time of day that you can make work. If it's 5 o'clock in the morning before your kids get up, that's fine. If it's 11 o'clock at night before you go to bed, that's fine too. You've just got to find a time and stick to it. You can start to think about, you can really stymie yourself if you get hung up really on, is my idea any good? Or how am I going to write brilliant prose? Or oh my God, I don't know how my novel's going to end. How can I do this? You can tie yourself up in knots. So another piece of advice I have is to put all of that aside. Do not think about it. Don't worry if you haven't got a plot. Don't worry if you haven't got a story. What you need as a starting point is space, and you need to take yourself seriously. And I think really that's the number one piece of advice for starting out, is not just make that time, but give yourself permission to take this seriously. You've switched on Instagram, perhaps Facebook, perhaps randomly you've come across this and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to make the time? Look at her sitting there, with all of her endless time. How am I going to do this? And the way you're going to do this is that you are going to give yourself permission to take this incredibly seriously. Nobody wants you to write this book particularly. I mean, unless you're being begged by a publisher, I think that's very unlikely. Most of the time, you are the only person who's going to care whether you write this book. And if you don't give yourself permission to really take that seriously and make it your reason for getting out of bed in the morning. I know that sounds extreme, but you need to really care about this. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not really a hobby. I mean, it can be, but if you want to write a novel that's going to get published, it's a serious endeavour, and somehow to give yourself the focus and the headspace, you need to give yourself permission to do it, to take it seriously. Writing isn't what I do, it's who I am, to a certain extent. And then, so the other thing I think is really, really important is, and this again goes against almost what an awful lot of advice is. An awful lot of advice is, you want to write a novel, join creative writing classes, tell everyone, talk to people, run through your ideas, blah, blah, blah. That does work for some people. I've just done a literary festival panel with 3 other authors, and their top tips were to do with get lots of readers, be part of a group. That can work really, really well. But at this stage, before you get to that stage, I would urge you, and this is a bit unconventional, but I would urge you to tell nobody that you're doing this. The reason for that is that I really think that secrecy is creatively liberating. If you are doing this purely for yourself, you are going to give yourself headspace and creative space that you won't get if you think, I'm going to sit here and write for half an hour and then I'm going to WhatsApp it to my 10 friends. If you do that, you're thinking all the time at the back of your mind, you've got, oh, what are they going to think? Oh, maybe I shouldn't do that because, Susie wouldn't like that. Or if you literally keep this to yourself, make this the love affair you're having in secret, you're going to carve out headspace for yourself, and that will allow you to delve deeply into your own psyche, to explore things that you're just interested in. And I think that is how you start to form a book in your head. When I wrote my first novel, so I had written a novel before I wrote my first novel that I had shown to an agent. She'd been completely dismissive of it. I thought, okay, I had written some non-fiction books. I thought, I'm obviously not a fiction writer. And I'd gone away and I'd done nothing, and then I'd written a short story about a whale researcher, and I was really interested in this whale researcher. And I wrote a first draft of this novel set in the 1970s with a female whale researcher. And I showed it to another agent, and she said, oh, I really like your writing, but I don't think this works. And I was totally devastated and thought, I'm really not a writer. This time I'm going to take that, I'm not a writer. And I went away for 9 months. I wrote a non-fiction book, and then this story just wouldn't leave me alone. And I decided at that point I was going to go back to it, but I wasn't going to tell anyone. I didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. I just got on with it on my own, and I rewrote the whole thing from the perspective of the daughter of this whale watching woman. And I could feel it working in a different way. It had a different energy, and because I had no intention of ever showing it to anyone, I never thought it would be published, I never thought I would tell anyone or show anyone, I was able to sort of take risks and explore things and articulate things that I think otherwise I would have been inhibited about. So secrecy is liberating. I really think it is. And I don't know if you know Elena Ferrante, who wrote My Brilliant Friend and some other. She's an Italian writer who writes. Writes under a pseudonym. They eventually rumbled her, but for years nobody knew who she was. And she has written about how she wrote for a long, long time. She wrote with no intention of publishing or having anyone to read it. And she says that trained her not to censor herself. And I'm not suggesting you do this for a really long time, but I am suggesting that at first you do this. So just to sort of round up, the tips I would give you, the top tips, I suppose the top 3 tips from this would be permission to take yourself seriously. Find time every single day, 5 days a week, a time of day where you can write, even if it's for half an hour. And number 3, be secret about it. Be really secretive, be furtive, don't tell anyone. Don't be tempted to tell anyone even, just keep it to yourself for now. So I'm happy for you to ask me questions, how to get this process going, but next week we'll talk about the sort of nitty-gritty of how you get this off the ground. But for now, give yourself some creative space and apply the seat of your trousers to the seat of your chair. You can do this.